Hello, thanks for being in a new video. This time I have with me the Huawei Nova 12S and I'm going to give it a full review so you can get to know it. Let's get started. This device honestly doesn't represent too much of an improvement over what we saw in years past. It's very similar. But pay too much attention because it comes with EMUI 14. This new version of Huawei's operating system already allows the installation of Micro G, which is a way that you can have Google services running 100% natively, that is without the need for Gbox, which was a kind of virtualizer. So, that I would consider to be its most attractive point, oddly enough, because in the rest of the features it is very similar, as I say, to the last generation. But before I go into more details, let me tell you that its launch price in Mexico has been 9,999 pesos. That's approximately 585. And surely if you are not from Mexico, the prices will seem a bit high, but within Mexico I think it is a price that we can come to accept, especially considering that Huawei gives you the FreeBuds SE, the Huawei Band 9, and gives you 3 months of screen damage insurance. So the whole combo seems very attractive to me for those who are looking to release a cell phone and are interested in a Huawei device, although at this price it definitely has very fierce competitors. So, what do you think if you join me to know it in more depth? At the moment, the recommended thing to do is to buy it in the official Huawei store, although obviously you can also find it in many other stores, both online and physical. But the Huawei store is where you get all the freebies I told you about. Now join me in getting to know it. As I anticipated you, in design it is very similar to the Huawei Nova 11, as it is going to have considerably thin bezels both top and bottom, so it's still very attractive. In this sense, it definitely delivers on a very sleek and very modern design. However, it does not offer us some special level of resistance. This model does not yet integrate Kunlun glass, nor does it have Gorilla Glass, so we are not so sure how much the glass will withstand a fall. On the right side we have power button and volume buttons. On the top, secondary audio output in conjunction with the headset for calls and a microphone. The left side is completely clean and serves to take a look at the thickness, which is only 6.88 millimeters. It is one of the thinnest devices on the market. At the bottom is the tray where we can place 2 nano SIM cards. It should be noted that this tray does appear to have a small seal to prevent water from entering. So even though it doesn't have any certification against splashes, I think it will hold up well to accidental water spills. On this bottom you also have another microphone, the USB-C port and the main speaker. The back cover design is another aspect that will be different against the Huawei Nova ones, which as I told you is very similar in many ways. But this cover is definitely very nice both to the touch and to the eye. This is the Carnation White edition, but it is also available in black and orchid blue color. As you notice, this edition has some areas that are more reflective than others, and that produces a very nice textured feel to the eye, although to the touch it is completely smooth. In terms of resistance, it does not offer any level of resistance against water, so that would also be another aspect to improve. The screen is 6.7 inches in its diagonal. It gives us a resolution of 2412 by 1084 pixels. So it is full HD+, although it has some additional pixels, curiously, but they are too few to consider it a 1.5K screen. It's going to give us a pixel density of 394 pixels per inch, so we have sufficiently detailed images. The display technology is OLED. Therefore, the black areas will be completely blacked out pixels, and that causes it to have excellent contrast. Also colors of good intensity and good viewing angles. So it's a good screen. We have no complaints about this screen because the quality really meets what you would expect at this price point. In fact, it will also be a screen with considerably high brightness, although we don't have specific information on the maximum peak, but I can definitely tell you that it is a very bright display. Even the white color doesn't get distorted much from the side, as can happen with some OLED displays. And regarding the minimum brightness, it's also low enough for comfortable use at night, although it does not have a special mode to further dim the screen within the accessibility options. However, it does offer the visual sleep mode and dark mode that we can find on other Huawei devices. In fact, it also has a flicker reduction to prevent the screen from becoming too tiring for the eyes. So I think in all these aspects it is a very good screen. It also has an ebook mode that will put everything in grayscale for more comfortable reading. And it has 2 different color calibrations, so you can choose the one you like best. And finally, it is a screen that reaches 120 Hz in its refresh rate. Therefore, it can show you considerably fluid and smooth movements when you are browsing the system, and it also has a smart setting. So when it's displaying static content, it will go down to 60 Hz so it doesn't consume so much battery. So it's a very good screen. In fact, the screen supports HDR videos, and also the pictures you can display them with this effect. That is, these areas that are more illuminated on the screen will also emit more light to give it a much more realistic effect. So I love the screen. The sound complements the multimedia experience perfectly because it's a good quality sound. The bottom speaker is the one that will offer us the most presence of bass frequencies. While at the top we have 2 other audio outputs that come to complement the experience well, although they do not have as much presence of bass frequencies, but I think that overall the sound is balanced enough to give us a good quality without being annoying. The volume is good, although it is not exaggeratedly powerful. Next we are going to listen to a small test, but remember that it is not the same to listen to it live. As you noticed, it is not a very strong sound, and also at the software level it does not offer good improvements because we do not have equalizer, we do not have Dolby Atmos, and to access the effects of Huawei Highstand we need to have headphones connected. That also leads me to tell you that it doesn't have a headphone jack, so you have to use USB-C headphones, and that overall I think detracts a lot from the audio experience. Finally, you can access the Huawei Highstand effects to have some surround sound. And in the standard setting, you do have access to an equalizer, but I insist that you can't use it without the need for connected headphones. This equalizer is very good because it also has bass amplifier, and it would be great if Huawei enabled it without headphones, but at the moment it is not. And if you want to use wireless headphones, fortunately there is good news, because in addition to the standard SBC codec and the slightly higher quality AAC codec, it also supports the LDAC codec and also LC3LL and L2HC, which are Huawei's own codecs. So while the experience with wired headphones is not very good, fortunately the experience with wireless headphones is great, especially if you use some Huawei FreeBuds to ensure the highest audio quality. Below you are going to listen to a test of the microphones of this device.
Esta es una grabación de audio hecha con los micrófonos integrados del Huawei Nova 12S.
The quality of the microphones honestly seems simple to me. I don't think it's anything outstanding. Below you will see a video recorded with this device using the sound system in my living room at maximum volume to get to notice if there is any distortion. See, the audio picked up with these microphones can become distorted in very high volume environments, so I wouldn't consider it very good for concert recording. It's not a disaster though, but you do get to feel a loss of clarity. The front camera is 17mm. Few manufacturers communicate their focal length, but Huawei does because it is an ultra-wide camera. It also has 60 megapixels on its sensor and f2.4 aperture with fixed focus. Huawei has a quick camera opening gesture by pressing the volume button down twice. However, it's a gesture that you can't use if you have the screen on or are in some other app. Then you can't open the camera as quickly as we would like. Because it's such a wide camera, it has 3 different levels of width, as I told you, 17mm, also 19mm, and the standard setting, which would be 24mm. At the top you have a button to show the color effects, which unfortunately you can't preview in real time. And in the bottom right corner you have a button for the beauty options, where we have the skin unification. You can also refine the face and change the tone. And with all the options to the maximum, you can look gorgeous. In the lower left corner, we are also going to find some other blur effects and different types of processing, since as you notice, by default, the front camera loads in portrait mode. This is something that I personally don't like because in case you're not that knowledgeable, you may have the blur effect enabled at all times and that can produce your pictures coming out a bit strange. I would like it better if you entered the standard photo mode, but notice how immediately when you rotate to the front camera, it switches to portrait mode. So always check whenever you go to take a picture if you have any blur effects enabled or it's in none mode. In this front camera, we don't have any blurs configured, and as you can see, by default, it doesn't recognize any gestures. Although in the settings you can enable capture by sound, mentioning a keyword or speaking loudly, and you can also enable detection by smiles. So these would be the alternative capture methods. Although you also have the floating shutter button, which could be useful if it's tricky to reach the normal shutter. But I'd like it to also recognize the palm, and that's not available. I like the front camera mostly for its breadth because the colors seem right to me, but not every time I feel they are interpreted accurately. In this case, I think the colors did come out right. It also gives us a good level of detail, but as I say, what I like the most is the range because you can really show too much information in the picture, and this can be very useful in group shots. In fact, it also integrates a front panorama mode which could come in handy, although I feel that the camera itself is already very wide. But it's a camera that can definitely give you a good level of detail, although I don't feel that the level of detail is its strongest point, but rather its width. Although in the edges, when you are using the widest angle, you might see a little chromatic aberration, which can be normal in such a wide cell phone lens. Notice how indoors it has a much harder time rendering colors correctly. In this case, I feel that the photo came out very greenish or cold and definitely does not have enough contrast to be a very good quality photo, although the lighting is handled correctly. In backlight, the preview still doesn't look well optimized, but it does have automatic HDR, so immediately after taking the picture, it processes it to improve the result, and in this case, no overexposed areas come out, so the result is positive. At night again, the front camera may suffer a little to represent the color correctly because in this case it was in a warm light area and actually the result looks quite cold. Fortunately, as I pointed out in the indoor photography, it handles noise very well, so it is a very clean picture but with not very accurate color. And in backlit nights, which is an extremely difficult situation in auto mode, it is not able to pick up too much illumination, but note how you can take advantage of the screen as a flash simulation to enhance this experience, and even with the widest angle you have a good result, simply that if you use lenses it is going to reflect a lot of the screen. Also, the illumination of the screen is quite cool, so it can cause a bit of a strange color if you are in this kind of warm light conditions. At night, you can also take portrait pictures with this camera. The result I find nice. We have a nice blur, although in this specific case came out a very strange area on the lens with the screen reflected, but the result I insist that I did like. And in the daytime, you can see how it is not able to detect the objects that are in the foreground, so it is not recommended to take such complicated portrait pictures because they will not come out very natural. The background blur is positive, but it is a simple photograph. On the back, we will find the ultra-wide camera of 16mm with 8 megapixels in its sensor and has f2.2 aperture, but the remarkable thing is that it has autofocus, so it also works as a macro camera. Then we find the main camera of 27mm with 50 megapixels on its sensor aperture f1.9 and also has autofocus. However, it does not have optical stabilization and that could play against it. And finally, we have here an additional depth sensor, but Huawei doesn't consider it a camera, which I like. Supposedly to improve portrait quality, we'll check it out in a moment. Next, let's test how long it takes for the photo capture to react. I'm trying to capture number 3, and it also serves to give you a look at the preview, which is slightly delayed compared to what we see in real life. So my third attempt will be watching the screen at the moment the number 3 changes. And as they all count, watching the screen will be where you will get the best result, and the capture is very good and very snappy. In this case, it was even a small instant before number 3. In my second and first attempt, I was a little bit ahead because live to real life instead of seeing the screen. So the result is very good in capture speed. Now let's try the burst, which as you will notice is a burst that can go up to 100 pictures, but it is not really too fast. Also notice that it takes more than half a second to start capturing, so it wouldn't help you to capture the exact moment. I think the burst could be improved. Again, you'll find a button to load the special color effects, but you can't preview them in real time. And there is also a button to disable the artificial intelligence that comes enabled by default, so we tested the device. Note that in addition to the quick zoom shortcuts, it has a slider ring that is considerably attractive, and when taking pictures you can tap on screen to adjust the focus and exposure, although it does not have a mode to completely lock that parameter. However, you also have access to the professional mode where you have more parameters such as the type of metering, also the ISO, which you can go up to 409,600. And that is something very remarkable because most devices have a maximum ISO of 1,600 or 3,200, but this device takes it to the limit, so it has great capabilities to capture the light. We will also find a shutter speed of up to 30 seconds and other parameters such as focus compensation and white balance. It is also a device that does have the ability to take raw photographs to develop them later in a much more advanced way. So we could say that for professional photography, it is one of the best exponents in its price range. And with respect to SmartThings, note that it is not able to scan QR codes from the main interface, something that from my point of view could be improved, but it has a shortcut in the lower right corner to the function called AI Lens. Once we are inside AI Lens, we can do the scanning of these codes without problem, but it takes 2 steps unlike other devices that have this scanner from the main camera. And to scan documents, note that neither detects them automatically, but you can access a special mode called Documents from which it will make the automatic trimming of the edges of your sheet. Although sometimes it could confuse the edges, but fortunately it does allow you to readjust these corners. However, it is a cropped photo, only unlike other devices that have color optimizers to perfect the scanning. In the sharing options, you can press the print button. If you want to export also to PDF, this document is quite simple in the corner menu. And remember that Huawei is also going to allow you to use the camera of other Huawei devices with the same account for an even more advanced multi-camera experience. This is something I haven't seen from any other manufacturer but Huawei, and that's why I consider it a strength. The device also has a 50 megapixel mode that allows you to take advantage of more information from the sensor, and in this case I feel that if you get to take advantage of this resolution, because if you notice a good level of detail when you approach these photographs to maintain a good quality, interestingly, and also has an artificial intelligence mode supposedly to improve the level of detail in these fatal 50 megapixel images, but I really feel that it does not give a very good result. Motion shots, I think it manages to capture them well enough so that it doesn't come out sweeping motion. In this case, you're looking at the result with the ultra-wide camera, and the result with the main camera is also positive in terms of motion capture. Outdoors, I think the camera does capture colors with good accuracy, although the picture doesn't look as detailed. But in color specifically, I think it has a positive thing going for it as well with good contrast. The ultra-wide camera has a slightly inferior color representation. You don't feel colors as accurately, and also there will be a little bit more chromatic aberration at the edges, although honestly compared against other devices it doesn't seem to be as intense. But now look at the zoom range you can get. You're looking at the picture with 1x. Remember, this is the ultra-wide angle and the closest you can get is 10x digital zoom. But honestly, it looks a little forced. From my point of view, 5x is the maximum zoom where you still retain considerably good quality, and at 2x it seems to me that it does manage to still retain optical quality, giving us a good result. Indoors, curiously, the ultra-wide camera seems to me to have had a better color rendering, giving fairly accurate colors and handling lighting very well, virtually eliminating noise, still maintaining an acceptable level of detail. But notice how the main camera gives a bit more reddish color rendering. Honestly, I didn't really like the color accuracy it can deliver, although the level of detail is much higher than what we could find in the ultra-wide camera. So, honestly, I like the result in terms of lighting and detail, but the color, I feel it lost accuracy. In backlighting, the behavior is quite strange. The preview, you see that it comes out totally burned out, and notice how after processing, in this photograph, I come out of focus. In fact, I made several attempts in this same place, and in all the attempts, I came out of focus for some strange reason. But I did another test in another setting. Again, notice that the preview looks totally burned out and the result after processing the image is completely fine. I don't come out of focus as I did in the first test, and the area that was burned out now comes out much better exposed. So I think the backlit results may be a bit inconsistent or variable. The ultra-wide camera doesn't seem to have this problem. However, remember that it might actually reveal a little more chromatic aberration in the area that divides the shadows and highlights. At night, the ultra-wide camera seems to me to perform very well compared to what other manufacturers offer us in this same camera format. Note that the picture has really very little noise and maintains good definition even without using a night mode, since this device does not allow you to use this camera in that mode. The main camera has a regular behavior in automatic mode, but with the night mode it balances in a much better way the illuminated areas, maintains a very good level of detail in the darkest areas, and is practically free of noise, so it takes very good night shots. Interestingly, also the device gives you the 2x setting available in night mode. In this case, you are looking at the picture in automatic mode and the result is already very good and positive, but with the night mode what it will do is raise the sharpness, although it seems a bit forced to me, but even with 2x zoom it takes good night pictures. Even in the darkest areas, notice that the ultra-wide camera manages to pick up the lighting very well. The main camera does a better job of saturating colors, although darker areas might generate some slightly odd artifacts. However, with the night mode, this noise that was generated in the darker areas is eliminated and the result is very nice. Using the 2x zoom, we will also have a good result, and with the night mode, it will simply give a little more precision to the color that previously was a little more saturated than it should have been. For macro photography, the main camera is indeed capable of focusing on close objects, but it won't be able to do very even focus due to the nature of the lens, sensor, aperture, and other things. However, I like the photography. If you zoom in 2x's, you might get to improve the level of detail a bit by having a bit more even focus, although the color was curiously distorted. But the ideal would be to use the macro mode because you see how it keeps the color saturation and lets you have a much more uniform focus since it uses the ultra-wide camera with the autofocus. So, the result of macro photography is very positive. And if the ultra-wide camera doesn't give you enough breadth as you want, you can use the panorama mode that the main camera will use. So the color is good, the detail is fair. I don't feel like it's a high-resolution panoramic photo like we see on other devices, but I think it can deliver. Finally, the portrait photography seems to me a positive point in this device, as it is not only able to detect well objects in the foreground to have a considerably natural photo, although obviously it also has some areas of inaccuracy, but what I like is that it lets us take these portrait pictures with different focal distances. For example, this is a portrait photo applying zoom 2x, and I insist that it gives us a much more professional perspective. And it also lets us take portraits with a zoom 3x setting, giving a very nice result indeed. While it is not an ultra-detailed photograph, I think that for social media publications the quality is very good. Even notice that with the 3x setting it manages to have a good detection of all these objects that were very complicated. In fact, it includes other blur modes like this one that generates a kind of hearts in the points of light that could get to detect, and other effects of swirl and the like. But overall, the portrait photography seems to me to be positive. For video recording, note that this device has good capabilities because it has the resolution of the ultra-wide camera, the main camera, and the front camera, so it has full support for this resolution. That's something to note because in the price range there are other devices that sometimes don't allow you to record in ultra-wide or with other cameras. Although if you want to record at 60 frames per second, you can't do it with the ultra-wide camera. Obviously it will be in full HD, but it does let you do it with the front camera as well. When recording video, notice how it does allow you to switch between the ultra-wide camera and the main camera, and even the transition is not overly aggressive as we see in other devices. The zoom ring is comfortable and not only has sliders but also quick shortcuts to switch between one or the other lens. It also has the option to take pictures while you are recording. You can pause and resume your recording, and finally it also allows you to rotate to the front camera without stopping your video recording, something that is very remarkable because few devices allow you to do so. However, there is something I didn't like, and that is that it has a 10-minute limit when recording video in 4K, something that can definitely spoil your experience. And finally, it does have an option to turn on the flashlight without the need to stop your video recording, even available with the ultra-wide camera, something that Samsung, for example, does not allow. The fact that this device records video in 4K with both cameras is a good thing, but even better is that it lets us switch between them in the same clip. Here you are looking at the ultra-wide camera recording, which is of considerably good quality. Having autofocus is obviously going to give you a good level of detail. When you switch to the main camera, you're obviously going to have a little bit more color accuracy, but honestly you don't feel that much difference between the two cameras with respect to color, contrast and so on. Indoors, the ultra-wide camera does suffer a bit more, especially to have well-defined details and contrast due to the low illumination that existed, so there is a bit more noise present. Switching to the main camera will make you clearly notice how the main camera records with much better quality in these types of conditions, although I still don't like the color. In this environment, you do notice a very big difference in color rendition between the ultra-wide camera and the main camera. In backlighting, it seems to give us a good performance. Notice that the brightest areas are not completely burned out, although the face and the darkest area could be a little darker than expected, but I like the balance it achieves, although the focus could feel a little shaky in this type of conditions. With the ultra-wide camera, it's going to be practically the same. Having autofocus again still has these kind of little details in the focus that feels a little unstable, although they could correct it with an update, but again does not get to burn the illuminated areas, although the dark areas remain slightly darker than we would like. And at night it confirms that the ultra-wide camera doesn't perform as amazingly well in terms of light input. As you notice, it suffers a bit, but color rendition is more accurate because it was a warm light. Notice that when switching to the main camera, it practically turns to a greenish or blue tone as if it was cold light, so color rendition should improve with an upgrade. In darker areas, the main camera manages to pick up the lighting very well to capture the objects that are present in this type of lighting conditions, while the ultra-wide camera does not have those same capabilities in these darker areas, so it gets to suffer a lot more. Therefore, it is more advisable to record with the main camera in these types of environments. For the stabilization, we can see that it does not have a very good performance because even when walking you can notice a little more movements, and when running it will obviously be much clearer that it does not have good stabilization. The ultra-wide camera could disguise the movements a little more due to the amplitude it has, so it is more advisable to record with this camera if you are walking or running, although it is still not a specialist in this section. The device does not have a portrait recording mode, and the fast camera has automatic speed, so it may be too fast for certain movements and it feels that it goes to a much lower quality despite being a video in the camera quality. For landscapes it can be a bit more useful as the auto speed can be adjusted. Generally it will always aim to give you 10 seconds of duration in the video, so it can adapt as time goes by. It also includes two slow motion modes. The one with the highest quality is full HD at about 120 frames per second, which is expected, but it also lets us go up to 240 frames per second in HD. So you as a user choose. I think both qualities are acceptable at this price. Within the vlog mode, it integrates a recording mode with blur. That is a kind of portrait mode. The blur looks good if you don't have too much movement, although the edges of the foreground look a bit cloudy, so it's not very professional in this sense. It's only for blurring some simple videos, but even that doesn't change the intensity of the blur if I move away from the camera, so I definitely say it's simple quality. And lastly, the focus, as I mentioned, in backlit conditions, it can get a little shaky, but in some areas with a little more adequate lighting, I think the focus can respond well to different movements. Whether you're close or far away from the camera, it doesn't seem to be having too much trouble maintaining good focus. The ultra-wide camera may have a little more trouble maintaining good focus though. At times it feels like the focus becomes shaky, but remember that with this camera you can focus on much smaller and closer objects, although again the camera doesn't seem to respond as quickly. The front camera performs well when recording, especially in terms of stabilization and width, since unlike other devices, this one shows a much wider angle and you don't need to stretch your arm too much to get a good frame. However, the colors do not seem accurate to me, and in fact you are going to notice that you are going to get some burnt areas in the video, especially if you are in a backlight a little more noticeable in order to properly illuminate the face. So, it's not going to give us a very good performance in that regard. Also remember that it has fixed focus, so you wouldn't be able to zoom in on some object to focus on it. Indoors, I think it still maintains this same level of quality, that is, it has good range, good stabilization. The colors in this case, I feel they improve, so as long as you have an evenly lit environment, I think it can give you better results. In the evenings, it will definitely confirm that the color is not as accurate because you don't see the warm environment it was in. You also see a little more noise present, but that's the price to pay usually for having such a wide lens. Normally, very wide lenses don't have as much light coming in, so that's why you get to notice a lot more noise present. It's not able to handle it well in these types of situations. And in even darker environments, it tries to illuminate your face by turning on the screen, but I don't think it's quite enough. Although fortunately it does offer you this option, which in other manufacturers is not so common. In this front camera, we will also find the fast camera mode, but with automatic speed. Although it can go on the front, I do not quite like that you cannot manually select the speed you want to have. It also includes slow motion modes in full HD at some of the more than 120 frames per second, so you can have a fairly attractive result of slow motion front. Or you can go up to 240 frames per second, reducing the resolution to HD. And it also applies a crop on the sensor, so you get a little bit closer to the camera. But it's interesting to be able to go up to 240 frames on the front, because very few devices allow you to do that. And finally, it also integrates dual recording mode exclusively within the vlog mode, so it goes to 23 frames per second, but you can show the rear camera and the front camera at the same time. Although note that in environments where it's very hot, it possibly gets a bit slow processing and you're definitely going to get a pretty bad result. Fortunately, it keeps the focus on and also lets you zoom in, but the result can definitely look a bit strange because of this. But even when the device is cool, it can still have some audio hiccups, especially when you're switching between different lenses, so it still seems to have a few little issues there, but overall it's a positive mode that hopefully with an update they'll optimize because it keeps focus enabled. You can change the zoom, you can rotate to the front camera as well, or you can switch between different modes like a split screen mode or two rear cameras showing at the same time, and the picture-in-picture mode box, you can move it along the screen with a little bump on the right. So the mode is really well done, but they should still optimize the performance so you don't have any problems when recording. In software, we will find MUI 14 running on this device. We all know that it doesn't come with Google services pre-installed, but I must tell you that coming with MUI 014, the installation of Google applications has become even easier. As you can see, in this case I have YouTube installed natively. It is not running on Gbox, unlike past versions. Likewise, I have Gmail and any other Google application running fully natively. So from my point of view, that would be the main benefit of this device and all the ones that come with MUI 14. The installation will be very simple. Within App Gallery, you go to search for any Google application, for example YouTube, and simply click the install button and it will automatically suggest you to install two necessary add-ons. Again, you accept the installation of these add-ons and that's it. Like any other Android device with Google, it will install YouTube, and when you open it, you can select if you want to log in. This is possible thanks to the Micro G team, and in this case, the operation is completely correct and completely safe as well, according to the information I have received around this whole application. Micro-G is usually installed on many ROMs of different devices and different users, so it has a long run without any kind of report or security issue. So let's say it has a very good reputation and definitely makes it very easy to use Google Apps, as I tell you, without the Gbox. In fact, I currently only have Gbox to show you that I could access the Google Play Store through that tool, but it would no longer be totally necessary because through the app gallery I also installed Google Drive running natively, Google Calendar running natively, so I insist that it performs completely well in this regard. Huawei does not include a clear update policy, so we do not know for sure how many updates this device will receive. Most likely it will indeed receive MUI 15 or future versions, but it is not clearly stated by Huawei. As you know, at the software level, Huawei includes some additional options like this kind of hidden widgets inside icons with which you can have tools or quick shortcuts. For example, on the phone I could swipe up and directly I get one of my favorite contacts to call. The same happens with the browser, where I could directly access the Favorites tab, or on the camera I could directly open a specific mode. So these are shortcuts that could be useful. It also has the super folders, which as you know you can shrink also to become a traditional folder, or you can select to enlarge so that you can directly access some of the applications. A bit of customization will also be available through themes that you can install, completely changing the appearance of your device. For example, you could select this magazine theme, which notes how it even comes with an always-on mode available. So, let's select the Customize button so you can see everything we can do. In fact, we can select some image of our own as the background. Let's select, for example, this portrait and see how it automatically detected the depth to change the style of the wallpaper. In fact, I can hold down on this image to slide and move it to the position I want. Once you have selected your image, you can also change the style of the wallpaper. If you want it to look different ways, you can change the pattern. So it has a very good level of customization for the lock screen. In fact, it also allows you to change some colors in these patterns, and the colors of the icons you can also change based on the color of your wallpaper. As you can see, what you can't seem to change so easily is the clock when customizing your lock screen, but I think you can get a pretty good level of customization. Notice how most of the icons have changed the theme, although unfortunately there are two even from the Huawei apps that have not been customized. But overall we could come up with this level of customization, and note the animation it does to transition from the always on screen to the on screen. Definitely that it is very nice, this effect. It feels like a perfectly well developed operating system. Of course, you could also select some other magazine themes to change the style of the clock. For example, this one called Headline, which comes with a different font for the clock. Again, you can customize it to select some other font styles for the clock, and we're also going to be able to change some other image to select the one that we like the most. So notice how you can also have this level of customization if you wanted to. There are even some interactive themes that include these emojis, which as you will notice look very nice, especially because of the transition between the wallpaper and the always on display mode. Look at how nice this operating system looks. This could definitely be considered one of its strong points. So as you saw, it does have always on display that you can customize through the themes, or manually you can set some image that you want to have always on screen, or clock, or phrase. It's up to you as a user how you want it to be displayed. In fact, through the store you can also get to download many more covers. Huawei also has App Twin, which allows you to clone some applications to use two accounts of them on the same phone. And remember that it also has Huawei Assistant, which curiously in the voice assistant becomes Celia. So by holding down the power button, you can enter this voice assistant. There are many languages available, among them is Mexican Spanish. How many days until Christmas?
I'm going to check the search results I found online.
As you can tell, it is not very good at understanding various phrases. If you ask them for information, many times it will send you to the internet to search, but it is better to control aspects of the device. For example, we could lower the screen brightness, start a timer, open the camera, and similar things. Huawei's voice assistant is still at a very early stage, so its performance doesn't seem to be that spectacular. Huawei's one-handed usage mode, as you'll notice, is considerably good because it does shrink the screen both vertically and horizontally, although it doesn't allow us to resize this small screen, but it seems to me that the operation does work well. It also has some shortcuts that you can use. For example, you can double press the volume down button to open the camera as I had shown you. You can also take screenshots by double tapping with your knuckle. And you can record the screen by double tapping with two knuckles as well. So it has several gestures that can be useful. In fact, with the knuckle, you could also do a specific snip on screen, so the gestures could come in handy. Huawei also has the multi-window option, and note how easy it is to transform an app to this floating window mode. Just swipe it to the corner and watch how it immediately becomes a floating app that we can resize and place in the area where we want it. But we can also open a dock by doing this gesture, and in this area we'll also open the suggestions of applications that we can run. It should be noted that you can only open one application at a time in this floating mode, so it loses a little versatility, unlike other systems that allow you to open two or more applications in this floating window mode. And if you slide the app to the top left corner, you can open the split screen mode, so you can run two apps at the same time. So adding the split screen with the floating window, we could have up to 3 apps running within the same screen. Split screen apps remain linked in the recent apps list as well. And note that interestingly, in addition to the simple mode that is included on other cell phones, it also includes a bike mode that I hadn't seen on other devices, but it's going to make the device usable mostly by voice for answering calls and some other things, so it might come in handy if you use your bike a lot. Within the gallery, note that it has a very interesting feature for those occasions where you take two similar photos. You simply select them and press the compare button. In this case, the photos are linked so that you can scroll and notice all the details, and thus you can choose which one you like more or if you want to delete any of them. In the same way, you can click on several photos and then create a collage without the need to install any other application. And you can also create a video, since Huawei includes the Petal editor at no additional subscription cost. So it's nice to have a video editor available that also has an option to automatically generate the videos, so that you simply select which videos you want and the app will detect the best moments and has different templates for you to create your videos. Then watch how the result even comes with some animations and more advanced stuff. And I insist, all this without watermarking and without any additional subscription cost. And note that within its photo editor, it also includes an eraser, so you just have to quickly select what you want to delete and it will intelligently detect it. Although I honestly think that the eraser doesn't have that much artificial intelligence, it tries to fill in a pattern of objects around it, so it's not that accurate. This device has an in-display fingerprint reader that has a good performance. It is not as fast as ultrasonic readers since it is an optical fingerprint reader, but it works well and allows up to 5 different registrations. By the way, it also allows you to change the animation of the fingerprint recognition in case you want to have another one, and it also includes facial recognition, although I've told you many times it's only in 2 dimensions, so it's not that secure. It can only be used for convenience if you don't want to be constantly unlocking your phone, but for that it is best to use smart unlocking, which will work in conjunction with Bluetooth accessories, so if you have your watch or bracelet or headphones nearby, the device will stay unlocked. It also includes an enhanced mode for added security. As you can see, Huawei includes its own password manager, although curiously it only works on the device. Huawei does not yet have its password manager synchronized in the cloud, so I think it could still improve its ecosystem in that aspect. When trying to fill in some field, you can tap on the suggested account and then it's going to verify through your fingerprint if it's you before filling in. So the implementation is correct, but it would be better if they had synchronized passwords. It also includes App Lock to have a second security filter and the file safe to safeguard all kinds of private content. It also includes an option to search for your device in case you have lost it, so in that sense it is also a good implementation. In the privacy section, it also includes a permissions manager and also a private space, which is like having 2 cell phones in the same cell phone. Each space will have its own applications and its own files. It also gives you some suggestions showing you which applications are constantly accessing some content, so you can be aware if there is any application that is consuming a lot of your data. The device does not include any VPN from Huawei, and with respect to virus scanning, it includes a collaboration with the company More360 to be doing a scan against malware. Finally, through the digital balance functions, you can take a look at how you spend your time on your cell phone, and you can also manage your children's devices to try to prevent them from becoming cell phone addicts. You can set timers and other limits, and of course you can set a special PIN to be able to change these settings. And finally, for the emergency functions, remember that you can select some emergency contacts or select that you want to send an automatic message when you press the power button 5 times in addition to initiating the emergency call. The battery is 4,500 mAh and may seem very small to you, and in fact in an extreme drain test it obviously didn't perform as well because we ran an application running all kinds of processes in the foreground at full speed. So if you're a user that's going to be doing super heavy usage playing games or editing videos constantly, maybe the battery is going to feel like it's not giving you much performance. However, Huawei is one of the best when it comes to power management of apps running in the background, so doing the background draining test, notice that this device reached more than 9 hours, which is surprising because it far exceeds other devices with 5,000 mAh batteries, so the management that Huawei does is excellent. It has a normal saving mode, but it doesn't have an extreme saving mode that could help you in emergency occasions. So that could be improved. The charger included in the box is 66 watts and gives us fast charging. With 15 minutes of charging, it got up to 39% in the test I did. Then with 30 minutes of charging, it got up to 72% and the full charge finished in only 45 minutes. So it really is a very fast charge. Also, if you are one of those who want to leave your cell phone charging all night, you can enable smart charging to charge much slower and take care of the health of the battery. Or if you are one of those who need to always have your cell phone plugged into the power and want to take care of the battery so that it does not degrade, you can enable a limit and make it only charge up to 70%, which helps a lot to maintain good health in your battery. In connectivity, it still offers us support for 4G networks. Although Huawei has already managed to develop processors with 5G networks, in this model we still don't have that possibility. So you're a bit more limited. It doesn't support eSIM either, so I don't see it as a very good tool if you travel a lot. And finally, regarding mobile data, notice that it does allow us to select which applications will be allowed to access the internet using our mobile data and which applications will only be allowed to access the internet using Wi-Fi. So it can also be a useful tool. With respect to Wi-Fi networks, it supports Wi-Fi 6, so it's able to give us a good download speed in theory, although at the moment I'm doing a speed test, it doesn't seem to give me the full potential that I have here. In fact, it notes I'm doing the test with a higher end device and it even gives me a much lower result, so it looks like it definitely does seem like it will feature a very good Wi-Fi download speed. It also has Bluetooth 5.2 to connect your accessories with enough stability, although it's not state of the art. And it also has NFC, with which you could make mobile payments, but in this case you will rely heavily on banking apps or some other apps because Huawei Pay is not yet available in many countries. And despite having Huawei Wallet, it doesn't really allow you to add debit cards or credit cards, but only gift cards or keys, but you can't make payments yet with this device unless your banking app supports making mobile payments and is available for download. So if your bank supports that feature, you could take advantage of NFC, but in this case it does feel like a slightly more limited experience as well. It doesn't have FM radio and it's not capable of projecting your screen via cable either, but it does allow you to project your screen wirelessly, although it's a simple mirror, so you don't have as advanced options as we did find on other devices. Another thing we won't find is Android Auto, nor any alternative from Huawei, so it's important to consider that as well. In sensors, we do find accelerometer and gyroscope, in addition to the geomagnetic field sensor and light sensor. And regarding the proximity sensor, it's virtual, so it needs to be close to your ear to detect, and that could cause some inconveniences in certain situations as it will do it through the microphones. But well, in the rest of the sensors we find good features. In the ecosystem, Huawei always has one of its strongest points, as it has an excellent catalog of MateBooks, Huawei Watch, Huawei FreeBuds, Huawei Band, Huawei MateBook, MatePad. It has absolutely everything we could ask from a brand to have a complete ecosystem, with the exception of products focused on the home. But not only does it have a very good catalog of products, but it is also an ecosystem that interacts very well with each other. For example, accessories recognize them immediately for easy pairing. You can take photos directly from any Huawei watch by opening the camera from the watch. You also have alarms and timers synchronized with the Huawei watch. You can send pictures to the MateBook by simply bringing the phone closer. You can also fully control the phone from the computer, drag and drop files, and type with the computer keyboard directly on the phone. And you can also browse the files on the cell phone wirelessly as if it were a storage drive in Windows within the File Explorer. It also has a shared clipboard option, so you can copy content from the computer and paste it directly to the cell phone or vice versa. And you can also control the cell phone directly from a MatePad. So the truth is that the ecosystem is super advanced. All this is thanks to various technologies such as Super Device, which allows you this very good interaction between all your devices. Also remember that it brings the multi-camera option, and it also has Huawei Share to quickly send different files between various devices, so definitely the ecosystem experience is too advanced. Uniquely, I think it still doesn't have such an advanced ecosystem to connect with home devices. You can use the AI Live app to connect various accessories, but at least outside of China, I think there are still not that many accessories compatible with this app except for all Huawei products. But I think in this section it could still improve, especially considering that it does not have Google Home pre-installed. But note that looking for Google Home in App Gallery, I can also install it easily and ready. I can run it directly natively with this device to control home devices also from Google Home. And with respect to cloud storage, Huawei reminds us that it's going to offer us 5 GB for free to back up all kinds of information. But it's also going to offer us more advanced plans. So in this sense, it feels like a strong brand compared against other brands rolling in an expense entirely from Google or other collaborations. It has more accessory plans for Sony that rely on the somebody well done. Well, back in this sense, you have a complete experience. Let's talk about performance now, and let me tell you that it has the Snapdragon 778G in a 4G edition specially made for Huawei number 1. They still do not have access in more powerful processors, and the Kirin they have made for China are planned for China, so we have to settle outside of China with processors a little old, although honestly it is a processor that we have already tested and it has left us a very good feeling. As you can see, it took about 3 seconds on average to open each of these applications, showing that it has good power. I don't think it's the most powerful thing you're going to find at this price, but I sincerely insist that I think it's a good processor even though it's not the most modern. Believe me, there are other processors that, despite being modern, end up giving a very poor performance, but in this case, it is a processor that we have already tested and we are sure that gives a sufficiently smooth experience. In this case, note that I have 16 applications open at the same time, so we are testing how it goes with the RAM it has. Remember, it integrates 8 GB of RAM and it still has 3 GB of virtual RAM, so notice how it hasn't restarted any applications. I think in this case there's no white screen and no application loading screen again, so it's able to give you a smooth experience when you're using multiple applications. And notice that the navigation within the apps also seems to go smoothly. I think we're not going to have any problems when we're doing these actions when we're browsing social networks. So the performance I think is correct, although I insist that if you are more demanding, maybe you could look for some more powerful processors, and especially in this case, the limitation with this processor is that it does not have connectivity with the one I had already mentioned. But a big advantage is that it has 256 GB of storage, and consider that Huawei also has perfectly well integrated cloud storage where you could further increase your backups. But you don't have microSD, so that's also another important limitation. Let's try now also exporting a video in 4K with a total duration of 1 minute, joining several clips recorded with this device in 4K, and voila! Although it lasted less than a minute, it was close to 1 minute, confirming that it does not seem to be very well optimized nor have too much power to edit videos in 4K. The ideal on this device will still be to edit videos in full HD. For games, we will find a special option within the Applications and Services section and then Apps Assistant, so it's a bit hidden, but finally here you can enable these special tools and you can also add an access to the gaming area to the main screen. Once you're in the gaming area, you have the contents that are installed, and in this part you can also open the special settings where you can have an accidental operation mode by disabling different gestures including knuckle captures, and you can also block the automatic brightness. So in general it has tools to avoid interruptions, but it does not bring additional tools like other devices to complement the game. Note that when entering a game, you can swipe from the top to access these same options that we already saw, but it adds the option to open applications in a floating mode to answer a message without having to leave your game, and also adds a button to take screenshots, screen recordings, and finally something that could be very attractive is the configuration of control movements. That is, you can map a button to replace some virtual button and simply do an action such as turning the device to enable that button. It could become very useful in shooting games to reload your weapon by simply doing this gesture. So all in all, it does add an option to enhance your gaming experience, but not as many as other manufacturers. In Call of Duty, this device allows very high quality graphics at a high frame rate, but even lets us go up to a maximum rate, and remember that being a Snapdragon, it does support a lot of effects, although you can't use absolutely all of them in real time, but almost most of them do. The experience in this game could be considered perfect. You have very good graphics with excellent stability, virtually no dropouts, so it confirms that this processor, despite not being the most modern, it is going to give you a very good performance in games. So we don't have any complaints in this regard. In fact, it performs much better than other recently introduced processors, so I have no doubt that the gaming experience could be very good. You just have to consider that there are not too many games in the app gallery, so you would need to install alternative stores to be able to access and have microG installed through the app gallery to retrieve the progress if you have your games saved in the Google account. But other than that, performance is very good. Although recording the screen, you might perceive some loss in the frames per second, but without recording the screen, the stability is practically perfect. In the Legends game, we changed the default setting to a high quality setting at 60 frames per second. Again, the experience is going to be very good. As we were used to with this processor, it's actually too good stability, so I don't have much more to add on that. Even recording the screen in this game behaved quite well. It has good effects and very good stability at a very high frame rate. It averaged 60 frames per second and did not exceed 45 degrees Celsius, although it did get to feel a little warmer than ideal. In the SpongeBob game, we kept the resolution and quality high at 60 frames per second, as suggested by the device. And in this case, I think the ideal was to lower some settings a bit, because while it was not a disaster, I think in this sense it did reduce its stability a bit, having a little more fluctuations. But it's still a pretty smooth experience in this game, although the heating is the one that got to rise significantly, reaching up to 47.5 degrees Celsius on the back cover, and that obviously does get to be a bit annoying. So the ideal would be to adjust the graphics quality a bit to have a better experience, but I insist that I think that within its competitors it has a performance that does come to stand out. Finally, Henshin Impact is a device that gives us by default the low quality, but we raised it up to medium quality and also went up to 60 frames per second to see what it was capable of. And in this case, interestingly, it didn't go up to more than 30 frames per second, but we have an idea that it was because the game was downloaded through the Play Store emulated over Gbox, so it possibly didn't detect the full capabilities of the device, but limited to 30 frames per second, it performed flawlessly, pretty much total stability. So overall, it's a device that's going to give you very good performance. And as I say, now that you can install microG, it's probably a lot easier to install games. In this case, I still installed Henshin Impact from Google Play, as I was telling you. But I guess if you install it from Aurora Store or from some other alternative store, the performance will be better because it is not running on Gbox. In conclusion, this device is very continuous with respect to the Huawei Nova 11, but the big difference will be MUI 14, which already allows you to install micro G and thus run all Google applications natively. That will make a big difference, but it still has some shortcomings like Android Auto, which for some users could prove to be very important. I like the camera overall, although I still feel it could be improved. I feel like it's not the most attractive thing about this device, but if you are looking for a very nice cell phone, very thin, and also take advantage of the combo where Huawei gives you more devices, it could be an important alternative. For the moment, this has been all for this video. I hope you liked it. If you did, you know you can tell us about it, and we'll see you next time.